Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everyone today? I'm Reverend Nori Rost. I'm the minister at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, coming at you live from Atlanta, Georgia. And I want to welcome you to our service today. If you're a first-time visitor, I particularly encourage you to give a shout out in the chat so that our welcome team can greet you and get your email information if you would like to give that, and we can make sure that you're really graciously and gratefully welcomed. I have just a few announcements. First of all, I want to give a big thanks and shout out to all of you who donated to the fund to replace AB and Suzette's vehicle. As you may or may not know, they were doing their 1000% auction efforts and delivering auction wins up in the mountains. They got stuck in a snowbank and somebody pulled them out, but they put their tow hook in the wrong place and it totaled their engine. So in less than a day, we raised money for them to get a replacement vehicle. Thank you so much. That's what All Souls community is all about. Also, today at noon, Beth and I are going to be continuing with part 2 of our 3-part adult RE series on Unitarian Universalist history. We'll be looking at the merger of Unitarianism and Universalism into the one association that we have today. As always, we'll have Tuesdays with Nori at 5:30. The Zoom link is in the e-letter and on the website. It's just a great informal time to chat with one another. So I hope that you'll join us then. And finally, following the service today, you'll be randomly assigned into coffee breakout room. Please take this time to chat with others in your room, like a virtual fellowship hour after church. These will be random assignments. However, we will have a special room set up for the choir members. So now let's take a few moments to greet one another by just kind of thumbing through the whatever, people's faces. So good to see Dale. It's really good to see you, and Andy. Good to have you back, Barbara. Seeloff. We have like 3 Barbaras. Wow, that might be a record. I'm not sure. Ed, Gary. It's always good to see you. Jackie, hello. So good to see all of you people here with us today. We gather here every week, virtually now, and from different places and locations, not because we must, but because we can. We come not in spite of our differences, but to flaunt our diversity. We gather from every socioeconomic stream, race, ethnicity, gender identity, age, ability, height, Zoom platform. And we find that we're actually eminently stronger and definitely more fabulous when we can bring all of who we are into this virtual space and feel the true love of one another. And that is what makes this sacred space, and that is what makes this holy ground. So let's take a moment and breathe in the divinity of this hour brought here to you by you.
Soul Lift by Reverend Tess Baumberger. Wouldn't it be great if we walked around surrounded by our souls so that they were the first things people saw instead of the last things? Then people would judge us by who we really are instead of how we look.
Imagine no more racism, ageism, sexism, fatism, shortism, homophobia. Imagine falling in love with who a person is just by looking at them.
It would be a kind of cloaking device, hiding physical faults, defects, or even perfections.
I'd want it to be mandatory. Then people would work at making their souls more attractive instead of their bodies and faces.
Imagine people knowing by your soul that you really need a hug.
Imagine people helping each other and their souls changing colors or growing.
Imagine soul gyms with exercises to get your sagging soul in shape.
Imagine the long lines forming for soul lifts at churches, temples, synagogues, mosques, or nature's grand cathedrals.
Okay, are we good to go? I think I'm permanently unmuted now. We're not going to push any more buttons. All right. Good morning. I'm Beth Green, Director of Religious Exploration. It's been a while since I've come to you live for a story for all ages, and it appears that it's showing in this broadcast, but that's okay. The story that I have to share with you all this morning is What Would You Do with a Problem? And it's written by Kobe Yamada and illustrated by May Besum. We read a story similar to this a few months ago called What Would You Do with a Chance? And this is another one of his books that is really fantastic. So let's take a look. I don't know how it happened, but one day I had a problem. I didn't want it. I didn't ask for it. I really didn't like having a problem, but it was there. Why is it here? What does it want? What do you do with a problem, I thought. I wanted to make it go away. I shoot it, I scowled at it, I tried ignoring it, but nothing worked. I started to worry about my problem. What if it swallows me up? What if my problem sneaks up and gets me? What if it takes away all of my things? I worried a lot. I worried about what would happen. I worried about what could happen. I worried about this and I worried about that. And the more I worried, the bigger my problem became. I wished it would disappear. I tried everything I could to hide from it. I even found ways to disguise myself, but it still found me. And the more I avoided my problem, the more I saw it everywhere. I thought about it all the time. It didn't feel good at all. I think someone might be unmuted if you want to check your mute buttons. I couldn't take it anymore. This had to stop, I declared. Maybe I was making my problem bigger and scarier than it actually was. After all, my problem hadn't really swallowed me up or attacked me. I realized that I had to face it. So even though I didn't want to, even though I was really afraid, I got ready and I tackled my problem. When I got face to face with it, I discovered something. My problem wasn't what I thought it was. I discovered it had something beautiful inside. My problem held an opportunity. It was an opportunity for me to learn and to grow, to be brave, to do something. It showed me that it was important to look closely because some opportunities only come once. So now I see my problems differently. I'm not afraid of them anymore because I know their secret. Every problem has an opportunity for something good. You just have to look for it. The end.
Good morning. Today's reading is from Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. We are in an imagination battle. Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Renisha McBride and so many others are dead because in some white imagination, they were dangerous. And that imagination is so respected that those who kill based on an imagined radicalized fear of Black people are rarely held accountable. Imagination has people thinking they can go from being poor to a millionaire as part of a shared American dream. Imagination turns brown bombers into terrorists and white bombers into mentally ill victims. Imagination gives us borders, gives us superiority, gives us race as an indicator of ability. I often feel I am trapped inside someone else's capability. I often feel I am trapped inside someone else's imagination, and I must engage my own imagination in order to break free.
So I'm standing on sweet Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia. On one side of the street is the newer iteration of Ebenezer Baptist Church, built in 1999 to accommodate both larger crowds and more technology, now pastored by Reverend Dr. Senator Raphael Warnock. John Lewis was active here. Warnock was his pastor. Across the street is the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Sr. was the minister, only the third minister of that church that was founded in 1886. He served that church from 1931 to 1975 till he died. Martin Luther King Jr. grew up there, and in 1960 he became the co-pastor with his father until his assassination in 1968. This is sacred ground, hallowed by commitment to justice and solidarity in the struggle that consumed these prophetic leaders and did not burn up. And right next to the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church is the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Change, Social Change. I can think of no more fitting place to be on this Sunday following a week of violence, acts of treason by white domestic terrorists under the banner of white supremacy, under the pretense of a rigged election. Here on this hallowed ground, I want to speak about imagining a world with no fear, because we will always be faced with fearful situations. We cannot escape this life without having to face our moments of truth. And those moments almost always come at a time of fear, of dread, and unwillingness to go further. I remember the epic scene in The Lord of the Rings. Frodo had volunteered to go on a journey to Mordor to destroy the wretched ring of Sauron, the one ring to rule them all and in the darkness find them. The journey was fraught with danger and terror. The ring sensed it was going to be destroyed and used everything in its power to stop that from happening. One day, Frodo the Hobbit was sitting with Gandalf the Wizard, and he said, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened." And Gandalf replied, "So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." I'm sure there were many times when Dr. King wished this task of battling white supremacy hadn't fallen on his shoulders, but perhaps the first one came at his first parish, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, where he served from 1954 to 1960. It was on the night of January 27th, 1956, around midnight. Martin Luther King received a threatening phone call that would cause his life to change forever. A voice said, "We're tired of you and your mess. And if you're not out of this town in 3 days, we're going to blow up your house and blow your brains out." The caller was talking about the Montgomery bus boycott, which had begun on December 5th, 1955, after Rosa Parks was arrested on December 1st for refusing to give up her seat, the first seat in the colored section, to a white person when the white section was filled. So Black leaders in Montgomery met on December 5th to officially create this boycott call, and they elected Dr. King to lead it. He was reluctant at first. He was just 26 years old. He had just begun his ministry. He had a young family, but he said yes. So the boycott was not even 2 months old when he got that call. He had just turned 27, 12 days earlier. And he recounts how he went into his kitchen filled with fear, trying to figure out how he could get out of Montgomery without looking like a coward. He began praying aloud and soon heard that still small voice call him by name, saying, "Martin Luther King, stand up for truth, stand up for justice, stand up for righteousness." And in that kitchen, he said to God, "I'm trying to do what is right. I'm losing my courage, but I'm trying to do what is right." That moment in that darkened kitchen, Dr. King decided what to do with the time that was given to him. He didn't like it. He wished he didn't have to, but he did. His house wasn't blown up in 3 days, nor was he killed. The bombing came later that year, on September 30th, 1956, while he was at the church and his wife and young daughter Yolanda were at home. When he heard the explosion, he said it took him the span of a breath to reach their home. He was, of course, relieved to find his wife and daughter safe. But outside, 500 angry people had gathered, wanting revenge, wanting to do harm to the white men who had done this. And Dr. King just held up his hand and said, "Just go on home. We can't fight this with fighting. He who lives by the sword will die by the sword. God will take care of us." His assassination came 12 years later, as he stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was only 38. But just think how he changed the world in those 12 short years, because he dared finally, after that moment of truth, to imagine a world without fear. Or maybe that's too broad. Maybe he just imagined a world where people's imagination weren't so tethered to fear of the other that Black and brown bodies are seen as terrorists and the white people who breached the White House are merely seen as mentally ill. Imagine a world where people could see our souls, not our skin color, not our class, not our clothes or our cars. Dr. King imagined that, didn't he? At the March on Washington in August 1963, he famously said, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." What happened on Wednesday was the result of the people who imagined a world without white supremacy, and it enraged and terrified them so much that in their white entitlement, they attempted a coup. They desecrated the visible symbol of our democracy, and they didn't even attempt to hide their faces. Why? Because they don't expect punishment. They're white, they reason, so this is their right. And they do so claiming to be patriots. Patriots. They believed the lies of a man with no imagination of a world where he isn't the most important person, and the lies spewed out by his minions about a stolen election because that's what their imaginations feared. They aren't mentally ill. They lack imagination to see the beauty of our rich diversity. And it doesn't matter how many courts refuse Trump's claim or how many recounts occur, they can't imagine that their way of life is coming to an end. That we are moving to a culture of dismantling white supremacy, of white people being willing to do the hard work of looking at our own complicity in white supremacy, our own white privilege. There are only 2 things you need to be able to do to create change, Dr. King said. Forgive everybody and lose your fear of death. The cowardly, treasonous traitors who attacked our nation's capital on Wednesday are so filled with fear about the death of their privilege their sense of superiority, that they would commit treason rather than to simply let it go. Just imagine what a pitiful, small life they have. The Center for Nonviolent Social Change is here, established by Coretta Scott King, Dr. King's widow, because on that night, January 27th, 1956, a young man said yes. A young man said, I wish this hadn't come to me, but I will do the work. What we saw this week were acts of cowards, of bullies too used to getting their own way. They don't understand that great imagination of life and liberty and justice for all. When Arkansas Governor Faubus refused the unanimous Supreme Court decision to desegregate schools and called in the National Guard to stop it with might, with force, he was actually responding to the success his opponents were having with segregationist views. He didn't want to lose his power, so he used Black lives as a pawn for his political gain. And he was a Democrat. Both of these events, and every Black or brown person killed by the police, and every lynching and the whole confederacy of the Civil War is the ring of white supremacy, the ring of Mordor, displaying all its destructive power. It isn't a ring that can be hidden for long. It always shows its deadly power. It isn't a ring that can't be dipped in some kumbaya jewelry cleaner. It is the ring of Mordor, the ring of white supremacy that can only be destroyed by people willing to take it into the fires of the birth of our nation where it was forged and destroy it. It can't be destroyed by pretending to be colorblind. That's not what Dr. King was saying in his I Have a Dream speech. The idea of race has been used as a tool of the oppressor for so long, it's in all of our DNA. No, the ring can only be thrown in the fire by taking a long, dangerous journey to the center of our souls and to the reaches of history. In the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf is beginning to understand the danger of the ring, he says to Frodo to hide the ring, keep it secret, keep it safe, he says. But we've been doing that for far too long. We need to take the ring to Mordor, and we need to do so publicly. Let me give you a couple examples. On December 21st, 2020, just a month ago, in an editorial entitled The Truth in Black and White, the top editor of the Kansas City Star confessed to the systemic racist past of the newspaper that was founded in 1880. In the wake of the peaceful protests surrounding the murder of George Floyd, reporter Mara Rose Williams at the Star suggested investigating its own past, and they did. They went through scores of articles dating all the way back to the founding of the newspaper and were frankly sickened by what they saw. Lead editor Fannin describes how Black people were written about as criminals living in a crime-laden world, and ignored stories about Black families whose homes were bombed. The paper failed to cover Black cultural icons such as influential jazz musician Charlie Bird Parker until his death, and even then, his name was misspelled and his age was wrong. The Star failed to report on the growing civil rights movement and fight against desegregation, and continued to do so even after the staff diversified in the 1960s. Still, Fannin says progress is being made, citing recent work on communities of color and the Black Lives Matter movement, and the recent hiring of an editor to focus on race and equity issues. They produced a hefty 6-part series to bring their shameful history into the open, and they're pledging to do better. And they did that as the result of the nonviolent protests of George Floyd's murder. That's taking the ring to Mordor. In 2018, the New York Times, largely as a result of the first Women's March in 2017, acknowledged their ongoing historic systemic lack. You know, they're famous for their obituaries. They're like small novellas of famous people, right? But they acknowledge their lack of obituaries for famous women, particularly African American women, and they began publishing them in a series called Overlooked, as if they had happened today. Ida B. Wells, Sylvia Plath, Charlotte Bronte, photographer Diane Argus, and scores of other women who made lasting change are finally getting the obituaries of their life they deserved. That's taking the ring to its destruction after the peaceful protest of the Women's March of 2017. The Truth and Conciliation Commission that our own Reverend Dr. Stephanie Spalding is spearheading is taking the ring. And when you go to truthandconciliation.org and take the pledge of dismantling white supremacy, you're taking the ring to its destruction as well. Notice how these movements came about as a result of peaceful protests, not by storming the Capitol. Is it scary? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes. But we're not alone. Frodo had his Sam, and we have one another to encourage us when we're feeling weak, to be brave for us when the fear gets too strong, to remind us that this is a hero's journey and that the whole world's survival depends on us doing this step by step, day by day. The actions of Wednesday and the continued threat of violence in the coming weeks in the inauguration let us know and remind us starkly that we ignore the ring, we keep it secret, keep it safe at our peril. It is incumbent upon us to do this, to take this ring hand in hand, and through all the dangers that we face, to the fires of Mordor, to the fires of the birth of our nation where it was forged, so that it might be destroyed. Until at last, the world that Dr. King dreamed of is one we all dream of, and that is when we will wake to its reality. May it be so.
Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. We now have an opportunity to be great as we give of our financial resources with hearts full of grace and souls generated by love. Instructions for giving via text, online, or with a check will be on the next screen in the chat.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
I want to say a few words before the closing words. I was reading the chat during the offertory, and one of the funny things that happened is in May, Trump did an executive order giving like mandatory 10-year minimum sentences to anybody who destroys federal property. He did that because of the Black Lives Matter protests, but now, well, that's going to have to go for the terrorists who attacked the Capitol. So that's kind of a good news. And the other is Doc said that there's probably going to be more violence, and I agree. And because of that, after today, I'm coming back home for the next 2 weeks so that I can be with you in case there's any more violence, so that we can stand together. So I wanted you to not worry about me. I'm going to head home after my class with Beth today. I'll be there on Tuesday. But our closing words from Dr. King in the Alabama State Capitol following the march from Selma. We're on the move now. No wave of racism can stop us. We are on the move now. And the burning of churches. Still, I'm going to need to do a little, effect here. There we go. And the burning of churches will not deter us. We're on the move now. The bombing of our homes will not dissuade us. We are on the move now. The beating and killing of clergy and young people will not divert us. We are on the move now. Like an idea whose time has come, not even the marching mighty armies can halt us. We are moving to the land of freedom. May it be so. Please join with me in singing our Extinguishing the Chalice song.
Now, as we leave this place, the chalice dims, but the fire still burns within our hearts. Beyond these doors, now as we leave this place, memories of each and every face carry us into the world, and we will return, for now we know that something greater than any of us alone is part of us as we leave this place.
I want to thank all of those who helped plan and create and produce this service. Mark and Bill and Kathy and Pam and Heidi, Jim, Sam Corwin, Beth Green, Robert Havermel, A.B. Lugo, Joe, Rick, me, and every single one of you who make All Souls the fabulous community it is. Thanks so much for being here with us today. In just a few moments, we're going to go into breakout rooms, but first, let's enjoy the postlude that Mark has prepared. Awesome, Mark. I love that little device you have that lets you play the saxophone too. So cool. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. We'll see you in the breakout rooms. Love you guys.